Evening all, welcome to Archant Towers. David Freezer here alongside our Chief Norwich City correspondent Paddy Davitt, not long back from Colney where we've been speaking to Daniel Farker and Jamal Lewis ahead of tomorrow night's game at Carrow Road against Nottingham Forest. The clash of the mid-table sort of unbeaten teams.
You've really sold that one, dear.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll get a job working for Sky Sports bigging up games like that, but sort of good spirits I suppose, because everyone's been able to enjoy a weekend break, which has probably refreshed spirits a little bit. You expecting a tough game for Norwich tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I mean, you say everyone, but obviously Forest were one of the games that went on and they won. Beat Birmingham, fairly tight game by all accounts, but that's 4 unbeaten under Ita Karenka, their newish manager, so they're obviously getting that bounce. As I said to Daniel earlier today, you know, that tells you clearly that there's a set of players there who are quite keen to impress the new man. So yeah, while saying it's two mid-table teams, maybe not materially a great deal to play with, or for, sorry. I think the reality is they certainly have something to play for, because he's making decisions about how he's going to move it on in the summer and beyond. And Farker, when he spoke to us on Friday, made it quite clear there'll be no down in tools. You know, there's no buckets and spades coming out between now and the end of May.
Like that.
So, you know, that tells you should have two fairly highly motivated sets of players. And if you're Norwich, why wouldn't you? I mean, the frustration probably still lingers a little bit from that first half against Bolton. So try and put it right tomorrow. You know, you shouldn't have any fears playing a Forest team, even though they're obviously in a decent run of form. But if Farker is correct, and these last 12 games, there's going to be plenty on them, then starting tomorrow night, let's see it.
I mean, Norwich unbeaten in 6. Forest, looking at their results, they drew 0-0 at Burton, 1-1 at home to Reading, 5-2 at QPR. They've had a weird season, QPR, haven't they?
Yeah.
And then, as you say, beat Birmingham 2-1. I was having a look at their squad as well, and obviously Norwich lost their 1-0 in, what was it, end of November. At the time, Daniel had said best away performance of the season. I'd imagine that's probably been overtaken now by Brentford and Wolves and a couple of efforts.
Yeah.
But their starting 11 on Saturday, only 2 of that 11 started against Norwich in November. That's quite a big turnaround. And some of the loan players they've got, I wasn't actually aware of. You've got Ben Watson, scored FA Cup winning goal at Wigan. Yeah. Jack Colback played for England. Lee Tomlin, we know what he can do in the Championship for Cardiff and Borough. On his days, kind of unplayable, isn't he?
Scored a few. I think he scored in that QPR game, if I'm not mistaken.
I seem to, yeah.
I think he got one, if not two.
Yeah, two.
So
and there's another one, Joe Lolly, who they signed from Huddersfield. He seems to have done well, and Costel Pantilimon as well in goal, who has played a fair bit in the Premier League. So they certainly offer some threat. But in terms of team news, that little break has sort of allowed Norwich to refresh in terms of their options available, hasn't it?
Yeah, 3 main lines there. Tim Closer, Ivo Pinto, with the extended break, are both firmly in the mix now. Closer obviously didn't play against Bolton, had a hamstring issue, but he's available. And Pinto, okay, he had the knee issue for the last month or so, and then he was back in Portugal, birth of his child. Yeah. But Daniel confirmed today that he made it back through the snow, and both trained Sunday today as well. So, but he did then caveat with Pinto that he hasn't played for 5 weeks. They're now embarking on 4 games in 11 days, so quite clearly that would be too much to expect him to go and hit the ground running now and play the next 90 minutes. So, wouldn't be too surprised to see Harrison Reed retain his place. He's done nothing really wrong, has he? In that,
he's steady.
That right-hand sided role. But I think Closer will come back in, because the third of those 3 lines was Christoph Zimmermann. There's an issue there of a personal nature. Although he's back in training, he has missed 3 or 4 days of training, and clearly that there is an issue there, that maybe his head isn't quite in the right space to play. So unfortunate for the lad, because he's been very good of late. But on the upside, Tim Closer, ready-made replacement, and that would tell me that they're going to retain the 4 2-man centre backs, him and Hanley, and then maybe just sit Tete in front again, much like Bolton, and that then allows you then to really try and do something in terms of the goals by playing 4 attack-minded midfielders behind obviously Nelson Oliveira. So interesting to see whether he retains Hernandez and Murphy. Not sure that quite worked really beyond the first 45 minutes. Maddison's obviously a given, Lighton, as you would say, is a given, and Oliveira. So for me, the question marks tomorrow in those forward areas are what he does down the flanks.
Yeah, I mean, the break probably, if anyone, it hasn't helped them. It's Hernandez. Hernandez needs game time, clearly, doesn't he? He was only just sort of getting on the same wavelength as his teammates. Yeah, I mean, if Zimmerman drops out, closes back, it would be a big game to throw Grant Hanley into, wouldn't it? If you were to switch to 3 at the back.
Raggett.
Sean Raggett. Of course, sent off for the under-23s last week in the snow. Got 2 yellow cards. Still getting up to speed, it seems. Be a big game to chuck him into, wouldn't it? And as you said right at the start of this video, all those chances that they created in the first half against Bolton, if they can just take one of them against Forest and play like that again, they're going to have no problems, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it is the theme, and Farker, that chat we had on Friday with no game, he went into it in as much depth as he has, but he knows that if they don't start adding some goals, then really you don't see them beyond this season, more so now looking towards next season, really threatening the top 6, and that is now the overarching challenge that faces Stuart Webber. And if the answer or the solution isn't within the current group of players, then they'll need to go into the window again and try and address it there. But for the here and now, it's the lads who are already in the building, and Shrabeni, I don't see him getting a leading role ahead of Oliveira because he's very much in that bedding in process, and you would put Hernandez in that category. I can see Marley Watkins coming back in tomorrow night and having a role because he didn't do too much wrong against Wolves, but Daniel felt maybe that Bolton at home was the ideal opportunity for Hernandez to really get a taste of it, with Josh obviously, who'd also had a bit of a breather against Wolves. But it's just crying out really, isn't it, for just whether it's an Oliveira or it's a Hernandez or a Murphy, really just like Maddison's done, like Zimmerman has done, like Hanley's done, even Jamal Lewis, just grab it by the scruff of the neck and say, you know, I'm here to stay now. And through the force almost of my performances, you're not going to be dropping me. And that the only way that's going to happen with those attacking players is goals and assists.
Well, Marley Watkins, let's not forget, was a player who scored 10 goals for Barnsley last season, and we've not seen that at all from him. So, you know, the hard work is all well and good, but we need to see that quality as well, don't we? We mentioned Maddison there, story on PinkUn.com already. He's nominated for the PFA Championship Fans Player of the Month, second month in succession. Fulham's Ryan Sessegnon beat him to it last year, but continues the run of nominations that Maddison's had this season, and you can vote on our website as well. A couple of comments coming in. Any questions you've got for us, please do get them in. We'll be with you for sort of another 15-20 minutes, something like that probably. Craig Brooks, are the playoffs still on, and do you reckon? And did DF enjoy the snow? The snow, yeah, we were
Which
at the FA.
snow?
Yeah, there was a lot of it, wasn't there?
I think you're probably referring to your Raggett session.
Under 23s on Monday. That was probably that was the coldest game I've ever covered, just because at Colney.
Let me just tell the audience, you came back in as if you'd been like on an Antarctic mission. You wasn't in a good place. It probably took you until Saturday to thaw out, didn't it?
My cheeks were very red for the rest of the day, weren't they? I think I got a bit of wind chill or something, but I was properly wrapped up for that one. I mean, the players get to run around, don't they? But journalists still have to keep their hands free. But there we go. Well, I'm not going to complain too much. But yeah, Youth Cup was very cold as well, wasn't it? That was -3, -4. That
was tough. And I mean, we put a few pictures out, didn't we? At the end of the game, I mean, it was farcical, really, as a contest. And maybe it was an element of Birmingham were 3-0 at that point. Norwich got a late goal, didn't they? But I think if the game had been in the balance, and more importantly, if that had been in the first half, then you're getting into abandonment territory because you couldn't see the lines, which leads you to think, how could a referee or his assistants make key decisions about penalties or offsides to a degree? So that was pretty bad. But yeah, you've not had a great run of it, it's fair to say.
No, I'm pleased to see the back of the snow actually, because I pretty much couldn't get out of my house until Sunday. But anyway, that's the end of the snow. Playoffs, for me, no, very, very unlikely. It would need to be a serious winning streak. I did a bit for the paper last week that showed in the last 10 years, there's been the average points needed is 72. So Norwich are on 46 at the moment. You know, to take 25, 26 points from the last 36 available doesn't seem very likely, given the amount of draws and how few goals they've scored this season. But to add to that, Fulham finished 6th last year with 80 points. Norwich aren't getting 80 points this season, and that seems quite possible that 6th place could get that. So, short of winning, 10 of 12, it's not happening, is it?
You only win games if you score goals, and so that, can you see this Norwich team scoring enough goals to win 10 out of 12? No, sadly not. It's frustrating because there's so many other building blocks that you can now see are in place, but at the risk of repeating myself, until they actually develop that consistent goal threat, and as Farkas said Friday, actually, you look back on 34 league games, not one game have they put a team away, and it's 60 minutes on the clock, sit back, enjoy it if you're a Norwich fan at Carrow Road particularly, and it's pertinent because obviously Forest are in town tomorrow night, first time since they got put to the sword last season. Johnny House and Wes Ulan, absolute barrage in the first half, wasn't it? Well, unfortunately there's many positives about this Farkas sort of identity development, but one of the negatives is you're not seeing that at the minute. They're just not good enough at the top end of the pitch to really put teams away, and as I say, that it'd be nice to see some initial signs of that tomorrow, whether that wasn't Oliveira really rediscovering his goal scoring touch, or wide players weighing in, midfielders apart from Maddison, because as for most of the season, it's far too reliant on that young man, really.
Absolutely, they were proper goals. They were. Johnny Howson's strike, that was something special. I mean, that reminds me really of the Reading game. 7-1. They scored 6 goals in the first half when the pressure was off under Alan Irvine, and the playoffs already looked dead. So maybe we'll see a little bit of that now. We'll see if that begins tomorrow night. But it would just be nice if they can finish on a positive. Jez Arlo, this tees up something we haven't covered yet nicely. Do you guys think Matt Jarvis would be tempted into lowering his wages to play for Norwich again? Another year in his contract still, of course. Premier League wages, no doubt, even if there was a relegation clause, still going to be one of the highest earners in the squad. He could be about to make his comeback though, couldn't he?
By all accounts, yeah. I mean, Daniel more or less said he would get some minutes, scheduled development game Wednesday night at Carrow against Fulham. You'll be there, DF, and I mean, reading between the lines, I'd imagine he would start, and it'll be 45 or an hour, and that's the first step back on what's been a very long road. But it's interesting to frame it in that respect. Would he be willing to? Because ultimately, on the financial part of that equation, then you'd say no, Norwich would want to move him on. But Farker, on many occasions recently, has made it quite clear he likes Matt Jarvis as a player. He thinks he's that type of clever, technical midfielder. He's obviously got experience at the top level. Played for England, albeit once, and you just think on a footballing side of the equation, there could be a future for him here. But you just feel that unless there was some sort of arrangement they could come to, that I think financially, he would be one of the ones they would look to move on in the summer, a la Naismith, a la one or two others. So, but really, maybe the decision will be taken out of Farkas' hands and Webber's hands by, if Jarvis either can prove fully now fit and can do a job week in, week out, or if his body breaks down again, then the decision's taken out of their hands, isn't it?
That's the thing now. There's no point getting ahead of ourselves, is it? I mean,
he needs to play games, doesn't he?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
He came back last January, didn't he? And I saw the 23s games that he played in then, and his pace wasn't there. So he's got to prove he can still perform at this level. Got to prove that his body can cope, because his last game for the 23s was nearly a year ago against Sunderland.
Yeah.
He didn't play for the first team the whole of last season, so I guess we should probably just give the guy a bit of breathing space. If he gets anywhere near the first team this season, I'd be pretty shocked, to be honest. Yeah. But we'll see how he gets on. Craig Brown's got a point about Moritz Leitner. Needs to keep the ball better and create more chances. He gave the ball away far too often against Wolves. Too many of his passes are in his own half. He needs to make more forward passes. I think he's got a bit of a point. Moritz started on a real high, didn't he? And
I felt that. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that kind of the inference from Daniel is that physically he struggled with just the load. Again, you're talking about Jarvis as a player who hasn't played much football. I don't think he played for a good year.
Yeah.
He certainly wasn't getting a game at Augsburg. So,
and Lazio barely played, did he?
Exactly. So he's coming off the back of not much football. Then you're throwing him into, as we all know, the hurly-burly of the Championship, and maybe it has caught up with him, because I'd agree with you, those first couple of games you thought, here is a player, how have Norwich pulled this one off? But maybe the physical element of it. Daniel keeps talking about how he's in the ice baths and his recovery and finding it hard to maybe reach those levels that he showed in the first couple of games. But I think there's no doubt, if the physical side of it, if his body can adapt to that, then he has something to offer in that midfield, because we saw in those first couple of games the range of his passing and the quality of his passing. There's definitely a player there.
There's class in there, yeah. I mean, Craig continues, perhaps start with Vrancic. He can open up defences with his passing. Houlihan is not the answer, should not play again. Ooh, controversial. Far too slow, loses the ball too often. Sad to see him like this. We were talking about Marcus Edwards earlier, weren't we?
Yes. Just put a piece up actually, DF, on the PinkUn.com.
Yeah, that's already up. Okay, well, you asked Daniel for an update, and he's in the mix.
He is.
But I made the point when we were driving back that in long-term prospects of Norwich, is it better to play Wes Houlihan now, who is obviously coming towards the end of his career, he'll be 36 in May, or Marcus Edwards, who there could be potential there, and he could potentially come back on loan from Spurs next year, because he's clearly not going to get near their first team at the moment.
No, I mean, again, there's a lot of moving parts to that scenario, but ultimately Marcus Edwards, in the here and now, needs to show or convince Daniel Farke that he is ready to come in, either start or come off the bench in a championship game and influence it. And to this point, he still doesn't feel. Talked about his attitude again. He said it's markedly better than when he first came in the building. Still a little bit of way to go there. Maybe alluding to maybe a little bit of immaturity. He's still only a 19-year-old lad.
Yeah.
And he also then went on to talk about the strength and his power and his endurance. So clearly there's one or two question marks that are still to be answered. But it feels like, from what Daniel said today, that he's a lot closer to being in an 18 on a match day, and then it's up to the lad. I mean, you get the sense that he will now get a chance, whether it's this side of the international break or after. He will get a chance, but that's an intriguing point you make. Is that with a view to possibly coming back again next season, and then he's almost got through his acclimatisation period and he knows the place, he knows what Daniel Farke wants from him as a coach.
Have a full pre-season.
And then away you go, because, with the greatest will in the world, he might be the mini Messi, according to Pochettino, who probably regrets that soundbite now when he was coming through at a rate of knots through Tottenham's development teams, but he's still a million miles from Tottenham's first team. So why not get him out and get him into a championship environment? And, again, we're talking about Leitner. There's talent there. There's clearly talent in this lad. You're not getting talked about in those terms by Maurizio Pochettino unless you've got something about you. So, absolutely. If Norwich could extract that next season on a regular basis, then that's got to be for the benefit of them and also for the player, which is a little bit like Ben Godfrey, how he's gone to Shrewsbury. That's been a win-win. He's developed as a player. Shrewsbury have got the benefit, and Norwich, by definition, will get the benefit when he comes back. That's, I'm sure, what Tottenham are looking for with Marcus Edwards.
Yeah, I mean, you're not on Tottenham's books unless you have ability, aren't you? So it's in there somewhere. Perhaps he just was that far off. I know there was sort of rumours and conspiracy theories doing the rounds online about what was actually going on with Edwards, but I thought it was interesting to hear Daniel today pretty much commit to saying that he's going to be involved after the international break as long as he keeps working hard in training, because if there was something genuinely wrong with the deal, then he wouldn't be involved at all. But if you can ease him in towards the end of the season, then it's got to be with next season in mind. Following on from you just mentioned Ben Godfrey there. Adam Harvey asked which current players that we have out on loan can you see making an impact next season? So the other side of the loan coin. I mean, Ben Godfrey and Carlton Morris, clearly both at Shrewsbury, playing regularly, top end of League One, as is Remy Matthews. I could see all three of them being involved. Adam Phillips was back playing 23s last week since Sean Derry left Cambridge. He's not really been involved very much, so whether he's going to need another loan before he gets close, I'm not sure. And Todd Cantwell scored and started for Tunis Tatard in their last game, so he could be in the mix. Sort of anyone else on top of that, do you think?
No, I think I wouldn't look beyond that group. I mean, there's one or two others who are out, but they're a little bit lower down in terms of the pecking order, I think. Matthews and Godfrey for me. I mean, if they come back in the summer and start to be in and around it during pre-season, then I could conceivably see them. Obviously, Godfrey, probably that is tied to what happens with Alex Tete, and with the greatest will in the world, I think he falls into the Jarvis category, Wes Houlihan category. There'll be a financial element to those decisions, but ultimately, Alex's best days are behind him now, and Godfrey plays in that area of the pitch, that's where Norwich see him operating, and he's had an excellent season at top end of League One. So we're not talking a massive jump to go from top end of League One to a mid-table with aspirations higher Championship club. So, and obviously with Remy, then that's probably tied to Angus, and again with the greatest will in the world, I don't think Angus Gunn will be coming back here because again it's not in probably Man City's interests, given he's now proven himself without a question of doubt that he can operate at this level. You'd probably look to now move him into the Premier League, mid to lower level Premier League club. So yeah, I think at this stage Godfrey and Matthews for me. Maybe Cantwell might be an outside chance, but that's probably a lot of that's going to be dictated by what happens with Maddison in the summer.
He's still young, Todd, isn't he?
He is.
He just turned 20. So
that you could maybe see another loan move or two for that lad. But I think Matthews and Godfrey, I think they've come through. To me, it feels like they've gone through the Jacob Murphy process. If you recall, he had 4 or 5 loan moves.
At Cov, of course.
Cov was where he blossomed. Didn't want to mention it. You did, DF. And then he came back in that pre-season. Massively impressed Alex Neil, started at Blackburn, scored a thunderous goal, never looked back. So, yeah, I think of that group of lone lads out at the minute, I think Matthews and Godfrey are the nearest.
Definitely. We'll do a bit of digging on Remy Matthews towards the end of the season, speak to the guys down there, find out how good he is, really, because I've not seen a great deal of him over the years, other than
you look
23s.
At the stats. No, but you look at the stats. I mean, not 9 clean sheets in 18 appearances, and played a massive part in Plymouth getting in and around the League One playoffs. And again, that leap, we're not talking a guy who's doing it at National League level or League 2 level. He's performing at the higher end of League One, so why not give him a chance? It bleeds into the philosophy of what they want to do down here now. They want to give young players a chance like Jamal, Maddison to a slightly different degree, but still, there's a chance. Are you good enough? And then let's see.
Okay, another comment from Craig Brown here. Keep reading the team. Very good against Wolves. Made good runs going forward. We need to try and sign him in the summer. I mean, when you were talking about Godfrey there, I was thinking that I would rather have Ben Godfrey covering for Alex Tetty this season than Harrison Reed, just because of that physicality. He's bigger than Tetty, let alone Reed, who is smaller than me, quite conceivably, which is an achievement, to be honest. Quite considerably, sorry. So whether Reed's available or not, I don't know.
No, I see another poster there. McLean, obviously, we need to factor in Kenny McLean.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I suppose he's one we know is coming back, isn't it? Because he's been signed with a view to that. But yeah, you'd expect him to play a part. But as you know, with players coming down from Scotland, for anyone that's been following Norwich City for as long as I have, it can be hit and miss. Scotland, for every Malky Mackay, there's a Mark Fotheringham,
Stephen Smith.
There's been some quite bad misses coming down from Scotland. Ian Murray, that's the one I was trying to think of. Yeah, so fingers crossed he won't go on that list. He'll be more on the Malky Mackay list. Right, deep breath for this one. Nick Alpers. Webber's turned over the squad and gotten the team's age, the academy and the finances moving in a positive direction, and Farker has dealt successfully with attitude, fitness and defensive solidity, all of which have been problems for the club for a number of years. I think they'll get the scoring problems sorted too. I mean, you talked at length about the scoring problems with Daniel on Friday when he was good enough to still speak to us despite the Barnsley game being postponed. So do you agree with Nick there overall with the several points he's made in one there?
Yeah. I mean, Webber said all along it's going to take a series of transfer windows. So all of those points are valid at this stage of the development cycle. But there's no sense, I don't think, certainly inside the camp now, that's it, job done, and it's like find a few goals and then away we go. I think it's basically an evolutionary process. They'll have to be astute again in this window, and a lot of this, unfortunately, will be tied to Maddison. His potential future. If he goes, then he'll go for a lot of money, and then it's what can Norwich do with whatever funds are made available on the footballing side.
Sort of different game you played then, isn't it? Almost?
Exactly, yeah. And of course, you take as we said earlier, you take Maddison out of this current Norwich side, then. I mean, it's not too much of a stretch to say you take Maddison's goals and assists out from this season. I think Norwich would be a lot closer to the bottom 3 than the top 6, that's for sure. So
10 goals, 9 assists, 37 games, all competition.
Absolutely. Jamal Lewis, who we spoke to earlier today as well, said he's a pivotal player, destined for big things, and that's going to leave a huge hole if he does depart. So in terms of the points Nick makes, then yes, they are all valid, but this is going to be a big test now. This isn't with the greatest respect to Graham Dorrans, losing a Dorrans or even a Johnny Howson, I think in terms of how integral James Maddison has been to Norwich this season, to lose him would be a major blow on the footballing side, and it's how you counteract that. But one thing I think you could say without any fear of contradiction about Webber since he's come in, he does strike you as a man who doesn't react to things or plan on the hoof. He strikes me as a very strategic. He's looking into the distance, this window and beyond. Farker clearly buys into that in terms of how they're willing to give young players time to develop. So they will have scenarios drawn up, and one of those clearly will be what happens if James Maddison goes. So the groundwork will be laid, I'm sure, and ultimately, as it stands now, it feels healthy on the footballing side, albeit the goals is a major issue. They know that, they have to address that, but you just have that fear at the back of your mind that the finances, because they're going to lose the parachute money at the end of this season. That's 20-25 million on the balance sheet. How do you plug that? You only plug that if we're talking about self-sustainable models. You only plug it by selling players. So, yes, it feels like progress is being made, but how do you maintain that when potentially the finances dictate you lose your best player?
What I like about Webber is, he kind of put himself on a bit of a pedestal when he arrived, didn't he? Because he talked about how he likes to be planning transfer windows ahead and how he doesn't like to be scrambling around on the last day of the January transfer window. And that all sounds great when he first turns up in May and the sun's shining and whatever it was, March when he was, or April, wasn't it, when he was unveiled. So then Daniel arrives 2 months later and they start to really put down their plans. But what he said was all very common sense. It was more, well, can he execute it? And we're starting to see signs of that. Of course, him and Daniel are going to be judged harshly if things don't work out next season. Yeah. That's football. If they are struggling towards the end, towards the relegation zone next season, obviously there will be consequences. That's how the game works. But he has backed up that big talk so far. So we can only judge him on that sort of long-term planning as we go along, really, can't we? Yeah. To follow on from your point about Maddison, question which I have lost. Will Carr, do you think there is any chance of Maddison staying? Short of clubs deciding that Norwich's valuation is too high, I'd be very surprised.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, will he be attracting interest? Yes, he will. Will Norwich have a valuation? Yes, they will, of course. So it's really, as always with these scenarios, a little bit like Jacob Murphy, albeit you'd like to think substantially bigger sums involved. But if the player makes it clear that maybe a Newcastle, as it was in Jacob's case, came in for him, he fancied that move, Norwich had a valuation, Newcastle meet it, then it gets done. The thing is, you would say, I think Maddison would probably feel if there's interest from the top end of the Premier League, he would want that opportunity to go, and then it's really just a little bit of horse trading between seller and buyer. But can only go back to what Webber spoke when he spoke to us after the January window, specifically on Maddison. He said, look, there's a guy who's got a very good agent, represents some top draw players. He's not one of these, shall we say, in that profession who just look at their players as commodities and want to move them on because they want to make financial gain off the back of that. And he's got a very good family around him as well. So I think they can look at it, what's going to benefit James Maddison, not in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, but longer term, in terms of the career progression for that lad. And if it was a mid to lower end Premier League club, then unless it's absolutely ridiculous money, then I think Norwich would probably resist that. But club that's been mentioned, Tottenham obviously, Liverpool another club, if that ilk of club are coming for James Maddison, then let's be honest, why wouldn't he want to go and back his ability to take the next step and the next step after that if you're going to that type of level of club? And obviously if those clubs are involved, particularly if you get a little bit of an auction going, then I think Norwich's valuation would be met and probably exceeded. So yes, there's always a chance he'll stay, but I think to reiterate what we just said there earlier about the end of the parachute money and how you plug that hole on the balance sheet, I think the reality is it's probably the odds are that he will go.
I think there's probably fewer Premier League clubs that James Maddison hasn't been linked with than has. What is it that we've seen? Because I think it's pretty much to the point where the Nationals can just make it up as they go along. It's Man City, Leicester, West Ham, Liverpool, Tottenham. There was a Man United link which appeared once, and I never saw appear anywhere else. I think that was in the Mirror.
Yeah.
So they're big clubs. If more than one or two of them are interested, and that's going to help Norwich's cause massively. We're talking about Stuart Webber and his planning. Craig Brown says, why was Russell Martin offered a contract by Webber? He clearly is not good enough. Now we have to pay Martin's wages until his contract runs out, which is next season. Of course, a fair point. It's kind of old news. I don't want to go over that sort of too much, but it shows that for all the planning in the world, you're not going to get everything right.
No.
On the other hand, he gave James Maddison a new contract last summer, didn't he?
And
Jamal Lewis. So those contracts are now worth big money to this club. So okay, it's not working out with Russell Martin, but
I mean, all I'd add with Russell, as you say, they've come in the building, clean sheet of paper, and as we know, because that's the sort of guy he was, irrespective of whether he had the club captain label, he was in those initial months of getting to know you, very important period for Farker and Webber. He was the go-between between the playing squad and the new football hierarchy. So, it might have been beyond his actual what he will contribute on the pitch. It might have been, in terms of he's a really solid professional, knows the club inside out. He's a link to the good times and the bad, and maybe that is what coloured the move to obviously sort out the contractual situation. The reality was, as we all know, it didn't work out for him, culminating in the Millwall game, and both him and the two centre-backs that day, him and Franca, never played again. So, on one level, it's all right to look back at hindsight and say, why give Russell Martin a contract? But on another, you could say, well, at least Farker and Webber were fairly decisive, and they could see that it wasn't going to plan defensively. 2 or 3 days later, they've brought Grant Hanley in, and away you go. They've gone in a different direction. So, in that facet of the Martin scenario, that's quite ruthless. That they've seen, okay, maybe Russ isn't the answer at centre-back. Move him to one side, get in somebody who they think can do the job, who has proven he can do the job quite clearly. And now, as I say, you fast forward 3 or 4 months and Russ is off in Rangers, and for me, I don't see him playing any part in the Farker.
No, because he's going to be on decent wages still. It seems to be going okay at Rangers for him, so whether that's another season-long loan or whether Norwich will just release him to join them, I don't know, but I'm sure it's not the last we'll see of Russell Martin at Norwich City. I'm sure he'll be back here in some form one day. Will Carr follows up on Maddison. Do you think he will make it clear, though? Seems quite grounded. As in, I guess that means Maddison make it clear whether he wants to leave. I mean, he can't just come out and say, yes, I want to leave, really, can he?
No,
the game works.
I don't know the guy, but as I say, you take soundings from Webber, who talks about the support network around him. I don't see Maddison doing an odd and wingy and getting in his car and driving to Tottenham's training ground in the hope that a deal can be concluded. I think he will be very professional. He's a very mature lad, and he will get on with his business until and if Norwich come to him and his advisor and say, we've had a bid from X, that's met our valuation, you're now free to talk to him. I don't think there'll be any agitating going on from James Maddison. No,
but again, you need to get it done, because the one that I remember was Leroy Fer, dragged out right till the end of the transfer window, didn't he? He even ended up getting back into the team before they sold him, because they had to sort of keep the pot boiling. So, you don't. It's not good for Norwich moving forward next season if Maddison's there when the season kicks off.
Well, of course there is. I mean, the caveat is the transfer window changing slightly, so I think it's the Thursday after the first game. So, as opposed to, as you say, you play 4 or 5 league games before the window closes.
Yeah.
I think this season, the next season, it is going to be, the Championship starts a week before the Premier League. I think off the top of my head, it's Thursday the 9th of August is the window closing. Okay. So there'll only have been one Championship game, and then that's 3 days before the Premier League window starts. So, in that sense, I take your point, but it kind of minimises the level of disruption, certainly. But that said, the earlier the better, I think, is what you want. And I suppose a World Cup maybe complicates it a little bit, because you tend to find that the business gets put on hold while the World Cup's on, particularly as...
You think he's going to be in the England squad then?
No. I was thinking more in terms of these big clubs with who we're going to buy, who we're going to sell, and sort of drawing up their strategies. But I suppose, take your point. I suppose if you want James Maddison, then you don't need to worry about him getting in the England squad. So you could probably do that deal before it starts. But what tends to happen is, your directors of football and your money men are normally at these tournaments. It's very hard to get a deal over the line, isn't it, before the World Cup?
And just finally on Maddison, of course, Jacob Murphy sort of put the cherry on top of his cake with some high-level England under-21 performances. So I'm sure that's something that James will be looking to do in their upcoming games as well.
Sure.
Just last couple of comments to come through. Then we're going to wrap things up. We also spoke to Jamal Lewis today. Tom Hill asks any news on Marcus Edwards. For any of you that didn't join us from the beginning, check out PinkUn.com. Pad's already webbed a story. Daniel said some good stuff about the Spurs loanee today, and suggested that he might be involved after the international break. But yes, Jamal Lewis, again, a very confident talker, isn't he? We spoke to him for the first time earlier in the year, and I quite liked that he was happy to sort of acknowledge that there's still plenty of room for development, plenty of things he still needs to work on, and he pointed out that he wants to contribute more going forward, you know, attacks, assists, goals, things like that. He knows that he's still got plenty of room for improvement.
Yeah, he's a very, very impressive young man. 19 years of age. We started this conversation talking about another 19-year-old in Marcus Edwards. We don't know him. We haven't spoken to him, so it's hard to judge him. But A, Jamal Lewis's performances on the pitch, and B, when he's in front of a camera, he's very self-aware. He knows what areas of his game aren't there, and why would they be? He's literally still taking his first steps in the professional game. It's made an immediate impact, and there's so much potential there. And because you sense he's quite a grounded lad, he's not going to feel he's not going to get carried away and think I've made it now. There's nothing I need to learn here now. I just need to maintain this level of performance. I think he's searching for that self-improvement, which you see in Maddison as well, and there's a good role model to have. A guy who's a few years older, but who's constantly working at his game, trying to get better. And as you said, I thought that was again quite an enlightening comment, that he's now finding himself higher up the pitch with a bit more confidence every time he plays. He's making those runs into the final third, and then once you get into those areas, can you find a ball be good? Whether that's an assist, whether that's goals, and let's be honest, if he can add that to his game on a regular basis, we're talking about James Maddison and what numbers he can go for. 12 months from now, Jamal Lewis has continued to develop, then he's going to be in the same bracket. Left-footed players are always a commodity that people are after. So, also spoke about his international ambitions. Northern Ireland under 21 at the moment. I think it's widely acknowledged that Northern Ireland are going to be making changes. I think Chris Brunt is retired as well, which looks like it will open up that vacancy for Jamal. Said that Michael O'Neill's not been in touch yet. Also said that England have never made contact with him, so there isn't any kind of dilemma for him to decide between the country where he was born and Northern Ireland, which is the country of his mother's birth. So that's fairly straightforward for him at the moment. Whether that Northern Ireland call will follow, we'll soon see. Full video with Jamal and Daniel on the PinkUn YouTube channel, so you can catch up on them ahead of tomorrow night's game against Forest. Les Elliott asks, what are your thoughts for next season? But I'm going to park that one for now, because we've got quite a few months to dust off the crystal balls and see what we think is coming next season, because it's still pretty difficult to tell at this point in time. As we head in tomorrow night, there's a game against Forest, who are 4 points behind Norwich in mid-table, and if Norwich are going to finish on a positive, they need to kick off. Well, that would be a great game to get it going. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Daniel, again, he reiterated again today that these 12 block of games left, more than where they finish this season, it's about bouncing into next season. And if they have any pretensions to get anywhere near the top 6 and playoff positions next season, you get Forest at home, you need to put Forest away. Absolutely. Because, okay, yes, they're on a slightly upward curve, but you look at them as a set of players there, and there's no way. But then again, how often have we said that at Carrow this season? Most recently, Bolton. And I noted with interest, Bolton played Preston last Saturday, went 1-0 up. Alex Neil's team, bang, 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 3-1 win. This is at Bolton.
Yeah, where Norwich lost 2-1.
And Preston are right bang in the playoff mix. That's what you need to do. Whatever the style you said about it, whatever your identity is or your philosophy, ruthless. Bolton were dealt with there by Preston. Norwich weren't able to do it, however good they were in the first half at Carrow Road. Can we start to see signs of a ruthless edge to them tomorrow? And if we don't, between now and the end of the season, then I think the reality is Farke will not show too much sort of benevolence to that group of players, I think there will be changes ahead this summer, because it'll be pretty clear then that that group of players don't have the wherewithal to produce the goal threat that they need if they are really going to push this on and really, instead of talking about getting in and amongst it next season, really put down a marker. So that's why it's quite interesting now, this last 12 game running, that, you know, irrespective of where they finish in the table or how many wins they get in the next 12 games, it's really all about, everything you see now is all about next season.
Yeah, big time. But Forest is no gimme. I know they're below them in the table, but they scored 8 in the last 3, and on Saturday they didn't start Barry McKay, Kieran Dowell, Daryl Murphy, who have scored the vast majority of their goals.
Yeah, Dowell, he's the Everton lad, isn't he? Yeah, he was good. He was good at City Ground.
Very good. I saw him play against the Norwich under-23s a couple of times for Everton. He stood out then, so he's a good player. So they're the guys that they got on the bench. So yeah. Norwich may need goals, but of course Nelson Oliveira used to play for Nottingham Forest. So I've got a feeling we might see a few tomorrow night. But
in the right net, Dave.
I reckon at both ends, quite possibly.
Okay.
If Norwich aren't going to play 3 at the back, I think we might see a few goals tomorrow night. But you know, it's about time.
You heard it here first.
Yes. So we'll leave it there. Thanks for all that, Pad. I think we've covered one thing we haven't actually covered, although not too much change. Tom Tribal, he is probably going to be back in full training after the international break. Might make the last 4 or 5 games of the season, but that was probably around about the initial diagnosis with his injury, wasn't it? So the sooner he's back, the better, because of course he is one of Norwich's better players. Right, me, Michael and Paddy will be at Carrow Road tomorrow night, and we will catch up with you guys again when the team news drops at Carrow Road about 6:45 tomorrow. Cheers.